Thanks, everyone, for having me. Pardon my voice. I came down with some laryngitis recently. But given how excited I was to join here for TEDx Binghamton, I thought I'd make it anyways. So please bear with me. So I just want to thank everybody. It's really exciting to get the opportunity to speak here in front of all you, sort of the next generation of leadership. Particularly exciting for us. We're a New York-based business. And I know after speaking with a number of you over the last day or so, there's a big Long Island contingent. Raise your hand if you're from Long Island. We have a Westchester contingent, I believe. Folks from all throughout New York. So I hope that at least some of you have maybe been to one or two of our restaurants and have some sense of what we do at Dig In. So my name's Adam Eskin. Thank you for having me. As was mentioned, we have a chain of restaurants based in New York called Dig In. My journey started not necessarily in the food business, but in finance. So I was always walking up sort of the proverbial life ladder, wanted to figure out what was going to be required to get into a good school, and then a good school to a good job, and then hopefully one day from a good job to another good job, ultimately to some form of economic prosperity. I sort of fell into the food business, and that was 8 years ago. And initially it was a little bit rocky and a little bit frightening, but I feel very grateful in terms of the confluence of events that have transpired, such that I'm here today. Waking up, going to work, doing what I love, working with amazing people, having a material impact, I hope, on the way that we as Americans eat food, the way it's grown, the way it's prepared. And maybe if we build something that's big enough, that has a big enough impact, we could probably make a couple bucks doing it as well. So we're going to get into the presentation. I was told to go like that. No. Yes. Okay. So 2 minutes in, that happened very quickly. Okay. Et cetera, et cetera. The fast food revolution, that's the name of my talk. One last sort of acknowledgement or apology. The tech team back here, who's been putting all this stuff together, sort of got slammed last minute with my slides amongst others, and there were formatting issues. I built my presentation in Keynote on a Mac. They were working in PowerPoint. So while it sort of looks the way it was intended to, the font type is not quite as tight. So anyways, the talk is about fast food. The revolution that we're currently undergoing from my perspective, and how I believe that over the next 10 to 20 years, our relationship with food, the experience we have with food, both inside the home and outside the home, is going to change dramatically. So today, 99 problems. So 35% of Americans are obese. I think most people know that. That's been growing. I think there's a chart on something, etc.gov, where you can click the button, and as the years pass, the colors change, and the problem gets worse and worse. I think they had the data up until like 2012, 2013. What's more alerting is that 17% of America's children are obese. I apologize, I didn't actually look up definitionally what children means, but that's a pretty big percentage of some pretty young folks who I think haven't even come close to going through the sedentary phase of their life. And then we have 5% of those children that are severely obese. And that's just obesity, right? So while obesity is a big problem and it impacts the American economy in the form of how it relates to healthcare and the issues and challenges that we're facing there, our agriculture system in terms of the type of crops that we use and how we think about allocating agricultural real estate as between the allocation to corn for various things like feeding cows and animals, to ethanol production and so forth, to soybean. It's misallocated. We could talk about that. That's a whole nother TED Talk. I'm sure other folks can and will do that. We're gonna stay focused here, but this is sort of the kickoff. This is sort of the basis from which we at least have sort of begun our journey as a business. So how do we get here? It's the result of version 1 of the food revolution. So this was on the tails of the Industrial Revolution. I think everybody here recognizes the golden arches. Just a show of hands, who in the room has eaten at a McDonald's at least once in their life? Okay, that's everybody, myself included. Another show of hands, who has eaten at a McDonald's in the last month? Don't be scared, it's okay. Great, thank you. So the idea back then, I don't think that Ray Kroc, excuse me, that was awkward. I don't think that Ray Kroc was malicious. There was no intent. He didn't set out to say, okay, let me break the food system. I'd like to fast forward 50, 60 years and have obesity problems. And otherwise, he thought, hey, let's make food more accessible by making it fast and making it cheap. And as you can see by the graph, as you go down, we as Americans, in terms of percentage of disposable income, we just spend a lot less money today on food than we did back in 1960. So I think it's 18% down to right around the sub-10 mark. So we've been spending money on other things. And while gains in efficiency and production and so forth, might logically suggest that food could be cheaper, right? So they're using technology to farm stuff as opposed to doing it by hand. Spending half just sort of doesn't add up. So to me, what does that mean about the food? Okay, so our response to what's transpired. There's a bit of a social movement that's underway. And when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about with you all, I looked up a couple of other TED Talks, and there's a bunch of great content that's already out there about social movement, about food policy, and about what's in place. So just to reference it quickly here, in the top left corner, you have Michael Pollan. Anybody know who that is? Anybody know? Okay. He's got 4 or 5 books out now, really inspiring. What Michael Pollan says is, eat less food, mostly vegetables, is sort of the punchline there. We have Michael Moss, New York Times reporter, wrote the book Salt, Sugar, Fat, and that really addresses the marketing problem around big food and big ag and how they can use marketing in addition to sort of the manipulation around things like food science and flavor to convert us over the last 40, 50 years to be eating the food that we eat and crave it in a way where it's very difficult to escape. We have Food Inc. in the bottom left corner, another great one, more speaking to what it's like to get under the underbelly of factory farming and how the majority of our protein is raised in this country today, or at least it was 10 years ago. Mark Bittman, another great writer, has a column in the Times, wrote a book called Food Matters, same thing. And then we have, of course, the First Lady in the bottom right with her Let's Move program. So this stuff, it all serves in the form of education. We can read books, we can watch movies, and we can learn. And we have been, right? So there are pockets across the country where I think folks are more focused on these things and these issues are more acute. But as more of this content gets published digitally, in print and otherwise, the smarter and the more educated we are becoming about what does it mean to eat well, what does it mean to prepare the proper food, what does it mean to grow food properly, et cetera. And we're at the halfway mark, which is shocking, so I have to hurry up. Et cetera, seen first in grocery. So while we're educating ourselves, we're reading these books, hopefully watching some of these films, we have the beginnings, starting in 1980, of access. So Whole Foods came out and said, hey, we're going to come at grocery from a different perspective. It's going to be less about processed food, and it's going to be more about fresh food, abundant produce, et cetera. Unfortunately, for a period of time, they developed a reputation of whole paycheck. So while not necessarily approachable or available to everybody in every sort of part of the socioeconomic ladder, certainly a start. And just worth noting, back in 1980, they started with 1, and now the fresh format industry as a percentage or as a piece of the overall grocery industry is approaching $30 billion, I think, by 2017, and that's something like a $600 billion industry. Okay, so let's just talk about media and the role that that's playing for a moment, beyond just books and movies. Anybody know who's pictured here? Julia Child, great. The French chef, February 1963, that was 50 years ago. So that's 1 chef, 1 television show. How many television shows featuring chefs in food or otherwise do you think exist today? A lot more. Okay, dozens and dozens and dozens. The Chew, Top Chef, Chopped, Cake Boss, Iron Chef America, Bobby Flay, everybody's favorite Guy Fieri, on and on. And so all that's doing is it's putting food, culinary, so the art of cooking, it's at the forefront. We pop on Bravo or any of the other channels, the Food Network, and you can't help but miss this stuff. Kale is cool, If Beyonce says it, it must be true. So while we have this thing going on with the chefs, and they're becoming sort of more celebrities and tastemakers and folks in fashion, it's like Bobby Flay is like the Diane von Furstenberg of the culinary scene. We also, on the other hand, have a lot of celebrities that are putting forth this lifestyle that living healthfully and living well, whether it's fitness or eating kale or otherwise, is cool. I think I just read recently that Beyonce actually just launched her own healthy food sort of meal delivery startup. This is happening. So another aspect of pop culture is, again, helping us. We're seeing it, we're touching it, we're feeling it. If Beyonce's wearing the sweatshirt, I want the sweatshirt. It's all sort of pushing us in this direction. So it's broccoli next. I listed this one for two reasons. One, I just thought it was fascinating. As I referenced before, this guy, Michael Moss, he had come to this agency called Victor and Spoils that historically has done a bunch of work for big food. And he said, what would happen if, rather than apply these really sophisticated marketing techniques, which work, what if instead we applied those from French fries, we applied them to broccoli? So they came up with all these faux campaigns. Right here you see Show a Bro You Care, the Broquet, the Alpha Vegetable. Just a lot of really fun, entertaining stuff. And what it showed us was, if we start to think about applying the same marketing techniques, sort of the same clever tricks, going back to that same toolkit that the big food guys are using, we might be able to make headway with vegetables. And then just as an aside, for us, our personal experience in food with broccoli, sauteed broccoli, fresh garlic, lemon juice, olive oil, canola oil, salt and pepper. It's a number 2 seller for us in terms of our business, right next to Brussels sprouts. And then just don't forget tech. So being in the food business, so I looked this up this morning, #food, 160 million posts. I didn't compare that to others, but that's a lot. I think we can all agree. And so just food in general, technology and social media is really enabling how we experience and how we interact. Everybody can take a photo. They go out to dinner. They see a beautiful plate. It's all sort of accelerating, putting kerosene on the fire. It's also worth mentioning Twitter. We use it as a way to consume information and a way to connect with other folks that are thinking and talking about similar things. 2 weeks ago, we reached out to a young woman who is about to graduate from Booth in Chicago, and just based on a Twitter profile and interaction with us and our brand on Twitter, it seemed like we had shared interests, and there was a real connection in terms of her values and what she was seeking to do and how we think about what we want to accomplish in food. So we reached out to her, and 3 phone interviews later and a Skype, she's flying into New York to interview. Hopefully we'll make it work, and she'll have her first post-grad job at Dig In. So just let's not forget tech's role. Okay, so the market, restaurant industry specifically, I've got a couple minutes left. It's a huge market, approaching $700 billion, and based on everything I've talked about thus far, it's safe to say that some large percentage of the existing participants in the market, could be McDonald's to an extent, could be concepts like Friendly's or Fridays, what have you. Those folks are either going to need to change in terms of how they operate, the type of food that they source, they serve, what goes in their menu. They're going to shrink, they're going to go away, or they're going to bring other concepts like ours into their portfolio. But there's no slowing this train down. And the exciting part about the size of this industry is it invites capitalism. It invites capital. It says, hey, this is a big, broken industry. There's an opportunity to make money here. And when there's an opportunity for capitalists and investors to make money, it really drives growth and it really drives change. And then you wrap that in social movement and policy changes and so forth. You have something that's very powerful. The Chipotle effect. Everybody's eaten Chipotle at least once, I assume. Yes? Okay. Pardon me for rushing. I think I have a minute left. What Steve Ells did in 1990 was he said, you don't have to sacrifice the quality of the food. You can still deliver accessibility. You can still deliver affordability. So the simplicity of the Chipotle model is what enables real food. Real food, in turn, enables real flavor, which if you want to do anything big in the food business, flavor has got to be number one. There will be no compromise there. We've learned that. They have a very efficient model. You go through that line. It's called throughput, which is a main driver in terms of the economic model that allows for that lower check average, that lower price point, without sacrificing on quality. And the bonus round for them as they went along and they started to learn not so much about vegetables per se, but at least on the protein side, how cows, how chickens, pork, pigs, how these animals were raised, they saw there's a real opportunity to make a difference there, hence the Food with Integrity program. So this is a validation here. We see McDonald's, we see Chipotle, and we see Shake Shack, who recently went public. So you've got the market cap, the number of units, and the market cap per unit. McDonald's is around 2.5 million per restaurant. Chipotle is at 12 million. Shake Shack is at 25. So there's just economic validation that there's real opportunity and there's a real shift that's going on that we can all capitalize on. So what's coming? What are we up to? What are others up to? All these chefs, there used to be a divide, fine dining, fast food. We didn't talk to one another. That's all collapsing now. So you have more and more chefs that are saying, hey, maybe I've got a couple restaurants, maybe I've got a cooking show. I'm also going to launch whatever. Bobby's Burger Palace if you're Bobby Flay, or this fellow down in DC, he's launching an all-vegetable concept. So you have pushing the culinary envelope. We're doing it is not going to slow down. You have innovation in the supply chain. Technology-enabled agriculture, whether it's drones or urban farming, rooftop farming, vertical farming, and more vertical integration. These are all things that we are looking at as a business in terms of trying to stay ahead of the proverbial curve on the sourcing side. I think value-driven is important. I don't think that's going to go away. Nobody wants to pay too much or get ripped off. So I think based, again, on the format, you don't need a white tablecloth. You don't need a pastry chef. There's certain things about this model that sort of make it more economically justified. We're only, as a population, I think we're going to be spending a little bit more money on food, but only incrementally more in terms of percentage of spend disposable income. And I think this generation, based on how we've been educated and what we know, I think that's more than welcome. At least that's something we're seeing. And lastly, millennials certainly value real brand connections and experiences over material things. So again, I may forego the shiny new toy or whatever it is so I can have more real genuine experiences, whether it's interacting with media, music, food, or otherwise. Last slide, we're at Binghamton. Bunch of young, talented folks that I've interacted with for the short time that I've been here. And again, I really appreciate you all welcoming me. So this is sort of my recruiting pitch. No longer an industry of lifers. So we're not particularly focused on hiring folks out of the restaurant industry. That's not necessarily our focus. We fancy ourselves as food innovators more than restaurateurs. It's attracting talent like never before. And the reason why is because we sit at the unique intersection of social impact, where we can actually make a difference, and economic opportunity. It no longer needs to be zero-sum. So whether you're entrepreneurially spirited-minded, whether you really care about food policy and you're thinking about getting to the nonprofit world, whether you're a technologist and you want to build really interesting tech and IP, or you've been in an industry for a period of time, whether it's finance or consulting or what have you, and you want to give a shot at food, our doors are open. We welcome it. We really need the next batch of leaders in this country to get involved in the food movement. And if we do, 10, 20 years from now, it's going to be irrecognizable. Thank you.